I never expected that Saturday to feel like anything more than a chore. My garage was a disaster, filled with boxes of forgotten memories, old garden tools, and half-used paint cans. I stood in the middle of it, hair tied loosely, dust clinging to my jeans, wondering if I'd ever get it sorted. That's when I heard Sam's voice calling my name. My neighbor's son. He was 24 now, tall, steady, with that easy, calm presence that made people feel safe. I'd watched him grow up across the street, from a shy boy delivering newspapers to this young man who still waved every time we crossed paths. "Need a hand, Mrs. Harper?" he asked, stepping into the garage. His smile was warm, effortless. I'd almost said no. Pride always whispers first, but the mess behind me was overwhelming. "If you're free, I could use some help," I admitted. And just like that, he was there, lifting boxes, joking quietly, making the work feel lighter. Sunlight poured in through the dusty window, dust motes floating like tiny stars. The smell of old wood and motor oil filled the space. Occasionally, our hands brushed, and I noticed the faint hesitation in his glance, as if he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. We unearthed things I hadn't seen in years: my husband's old fishing rods, the toolbox my father gave me, a box of my son's school projects. Each item was a doorway into my past, memories I hadn't realized I missed. At one point, I sat on an overturned crate, watching Sam work. There was something grounding about him. Patient, careful, present. "You remind me of your dad," I said softly. "He always took his time, did things right." Sam paused, leaning against a shelf. "I hope I can be like him someday. Sometimes it feels like no one my age values slowing down anymore." His honesty stopped me. It felt like talking to someone who truly understood the quiet moments of life, the ones that matter but are so easily overlooked. We worked until the sun dipped low, casting amber light across the garage. When we finally stopped, the space looked different. Cleaner, yes, but also somehow softer, like the air itself had shifted. I poured us lemonade and we sat on the back steps, shoulders almost touching. Cicadas hummed in the evening air, grass freshly cut, sun fading behind the trees. "That garage holds a lot of your life, doesn't it?" he said quietly, nodding toward the open door. I smiled, wistful. "It does. Sometimes I keep things because I'm afraid of letting parts of myself go." He looked at me, not with pity, but understanding. "Maybe it's not about letting go," he said softly. "Maybe it's about making space for what's next." His words lingered in me long after he left. That simple, honest sentence changed the way I felt about myself and about the life I was living. I didn't know it yet, but that day was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke with a strange sense of lightness. The garage didn't just look cleaner. It felt lighter somehow, like clearing the dust had cleared a little corner of my mind too. I found myself replaying Sam's words over and over. Maybe it's about making space for what's next. I never expected a 20-something to say something that resonated so deeply, and yet it did. By mid-morning, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but there he was. Sam, holding a box of old gardening supplies he promised to help me sort through. "Thought I'd finish what we started," he said, flashing that easy smile. The garage was quieter now, the heavy clutter gone, leaving room for sunlight to stretch across the floor. We moved slowly through the boxes, chatting softly about everything and nothing. He had this way of listening that made me feel seen, like I wasn't just talking, I was being understood. At one point, I pulled out a stack of my old journals. They were yellowed at the edges, the ink fading, but each page was full of memories, trips, birthdays, quiet nights by the fireplace. Sam leaned against the workbench, eyes scanning a page I had left open. "You wrote all this?" he asked, genuine awe in his voice. I shrugged. I suppose. I'd always liked to write down the little things. the days we forget, but that shape us. He nodded slowly. I wish I did something like this. I think about life a lot, how fast it moves, how easy it is to miss things. His voice was soft, almost vulnerable, and for a moment I saw the boy I'd known growing up in him, the boy who was careful, thoughtful, and deeply aware. As we worked, he paused, looking around the garage. You've made this place yours, he said quietly. Not just organized, but full of you. Something in me stirred at that. It wasn't a comment about the physical space. It was about how I'd carried pieces of my life here, every memory and lesson, every regret and hope. And here was this young man, barely out of his own childhood, recognizing it. When we finally took a break, we sat on the back steps again. I handed him a glass of iced tea, the sun warm on our shoulders. We didn't need to fill the silence. It was comfortable, the kind of quiet that feels like understanding without words. Then he said something I'll never forget. He looked me in the eyes and said, I hope you know you don't have to carry all of it alone. Life's easier when you let someone in. I blinked. My heart thumped unexpectedly. It wasn't flirtation. It was deeper than that, a recognition, a connection, an honesty that made me want to trust him with more than just my garage. That evening, after he left, I stayed on the steps a little longer, looking at the golden light fading into dusk. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not just by friends or family, but by someone who understood the layers of my life and didn't rush past them. The garage wasn't just a space anymore. It was a reminder that sometimes letting someone in, even unexpectedly, could change the way you see everything. A few days later, the garage felt almost empty in the best possible way. The boxes were gone, the shelves dusted, the floors swept clean. Yet, it wasn't the physical space that had changed. It was the way I felt when I stepped inside. There was room to breathe, room to think, and now, somehow, room for Sam too. He stopped by in the late afternoon, carrying a small toolbox. Thought we could tackle a few of the things you couldn't lift before, he said. There was that familiar calm in his eyes, that unspoken patience that made it easy to let him help. We worked side by side, lifting shelves, moving old crates, and I noticed how naturally our conversation flowed. We talked about books we'd loved, movies that had stayed with us, childhood memories we rarely shared. It was easy, effortless, like we were filling in the gaps of understanding between generations, without judgment or expectation. At one point, we paused. I was wiping dust off a window, and Sam was adjusting a shelf behind me. He didn't say anything for a while, just watched me work. Then he quietly said, You have a lot of strength. Not just physical, but life strength. I can see it in the way you care about everything around you. I felt my cheeks warm. Compliments like that aren't common in everyday life, especially from someone so young. But it wasn't flattery. It was truth. He saw me, really saw me, and it stirred something tender and unexpected inside. We laughed over a box of old photographs I'd forgotten existed. There I was, younger, full of hope, standing with friends who are long gone. Sam pointed to one of me holding a fishing rod and said, Your dad would be proud. I can see the same patience in you. The way he said it, so calm, so genuine, made me realize how much I'd missed having someone notice the quiet parts of me, the parts I never bragged about, the parts I kept tucked away. When we finished, we stepped back and admired the garage. The transformation wasn't just about cleanliness, it was about clarity. Sunlight streamed through the windows, dust motes dancing in golden beams, the air smelling faintly of wood and the faint sharpness of motor oil. We sat on the steps again, drinking lemonade. There was a comfortable pause, a shared silence that felt full rather than empty. And then Sam said something that made my chest tighten. You know you're stronger than you give yourself credit for. But strength isn't about carrying everything alone. It's about knowing who you can trust. His words weren't romantic, not in the way movies make you think. They were deeper, more honest. They reached into a place in me that had been guarded for years and reminded me that connection isn't about age, it's about understanding, respect, and presence. I watched the sun dip behind the trees, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. A realization that maybe life didn't have to be carried in silence, that letting someone in, unexpectedly, gently, could be a gift. And in that moment, I knew our little afternoons in the garage were more than chores. They were lessons in trust, patience, and seeing life, and each other, more clearly than I ever had before. The following week, I found myself thinking about Sam more often than I expected. Not in a restless or anxious way, but in a quiet, steady awareness. There was something about his presence, so calm, so observant, that had a way of making ordinary moments feel important. One Saturday, he stopped by again, carrying a small crate of tools and supplies he found in his own garage. Thought we could tackle a few lingering things, he said, that familiar warm smile lighting his face. I welcomed him in, feeling a rare mix of comfort and anticipation. We moved around the garage with ease now, like a rhythm we created together over the past few days. Boxes were lifted, shelves adjusted, and for a while we worked in companionable silence. Then, as I was dusting the top of a high shelf, I heard him speak softly behind me. "You know, Mrs. Harper, sometimes we hide things away, thinking no one will ever care enough to notice. But it's all part of your story, and it's remarkable." I turned toward him, surprised at the depth in his voice. "Remarkable?" I asked, half laughing, half choked with emotion. "Yes," he said, "all of it. Every memory, every small detail. It makes you, you. And that matters. More than you realize." I felt a lump in my throat. Here was someone much younger, yet his words carried a wisdom that made me pause, reconsider, reflect. It wasn't flattery. It was honesty, recognition, and it hit me in a way that no casual compliment ever could. We finished organizing the last boxes, and I finally sat on the back steps, feeling the warm sunlight on my face. Sam joined me, handing me a glass of iced tea, and we sat in silence for a long moment, letting the calm stretch between us. Then he said something I'll carry with me forever. Life's lighter when we let someone in, not to take over, but to share the weight. You've carried a lot, and it's okay to let others be part of it. Those words settled into me, and I realized how true they were. For years, I had tried to do everything alone, thinking strength meant carrying every burden quietly. But here was a young man, unassuming, respectful and kind, reminding me that connection isn't weakness, it's humanity. As he packed up to leave, I felt a quiet gratitude that went beyond words. Not just for the help in the garage, but for his presence, his honesty, and the unexpected way he had shown me that life could be shared without losing oneself. I watched him walk down the driveway, the golden light catching his hair, and felt a gentle warmth in my chest. That afternoon, the garage wasn't just organized. It was transformed into a symbol of growth, trust, and the quiet power of human connection. I stayed on the steps a while longer, sipping my tea, reflecting on the past week. Sam had come as a helper, but he left a gift far greater, a reminder that even later in life, we can still discover meaningful connections, unexpected wisdom, and the courage to let someone in. And in that stillness, I felt a deep sense of peace, grateful for the past, content in the present, and quietly hopeful for whatever comes next.